So we will deliver on our promise to level up, with greater investment in local areas.
We inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas, and that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
The Conservative government has given us the highest inflation in 40 years, the highest taxation since the Second World War, the biggest drop in living standards since records began, and average wages falling at their fastest rate for more than 2 decades. 2 million adults in this country can't even afford to eat every day, never mind heat their own homes. This lot are responsible for soaring food banks, poverty, homelessness, falling life expectancy and wage stagnation.
We also need greater social justice. And the way we achieve that is education. This is personal for me. Every opportunity I've had in life began with the education I was so fortunate to receive.
Well, let's take a look at the Prime Minister's record on this. In 2021, then Chancellor Rishi Sunak admitted per pupil funding would do no more than return to 2010 levels in real terms by 2024-25. Don't just take my word for it.
Restore per pupil funding to 2010 levels in real terms.
And Tory MPs actually cheered him. That's not a cause for celebration, it's a national embarrassment.
It's effectively restoring per pupil funding to 2010 levels. You've got a lost decade, haven't you?
If that's not bad enough, the Institute for Fiscal Studies estimates school spending per pupil in 2024 will actually be 3% below 2010 levels in real terms. It's absolutely shocking. Under successive Conservative governments, state schools have suffered the biggest fall in funding since the 1980s, and the gap between private and state school spending has doubled. And if you think that's bad enough, sit down for this.
We're talking about 10 years or more of austerity, and we have that level of investment has flatlined.
I'm going to try and answer the question. Just give me no more than 30 seconds, if I can.
What is the justification for it?
Well, I'm going to say to you, so when we came into office in the coalition, we had to recover from the financial crisis of 2008-9, which collapsed the economy and had to make some tough decisions.
It's the first time we've seen an actual admission from the government that it sacrificed our children's education to pay for the financial crisis.
By this spring, we'll have an extra 20,000 police officers patrolling the streets, answering the call for help and catching criminals.
Well, imagine the Prime Minister's shock when he finds out they won't be.
An extra 20,000 police officers.
Until his government has replaced the 21,000 police officers they've cut since 2010. And he'll fall off his chair when he finds out they've also cut 23,000 police support staff and closed 600 police stations. Even former Policing Minister Kit Malthouse has admitted,
although we're going for 20,000 extra police officers, actually to backfill retirements, we've got to recruit something like 45,000.
In fact, with attrition rates, that's natural retirement and leavers, the Police Federation estimates the number needed to be recruited is closer to 50,000. As a result of Conservative Party policies, by the end of this Parliament, we will have less police on our streets than we did a decade ago.
You say that nurses and NHS staff are special. All the polls tell us that the public overwhelmingly agrees, but also that they support the strike action being taken by nurses and hospital workers. You also say you're keen on dialogue with the unions. So can you explain why you aren't willing to negotiate their pay?
When it comes to dialogue, I repeat what I said before. The door is always open for dialogue.
It's just more bollocks. The Health Secretary has outright refused to negotiate with nurses over pay.
If Steve Barclay had sat down this week with the nurses and discussed pay, not the other things, but discussed pay, the strikes would have not gone ahead today.
When it comes to a fair pay rise for nurses, Sunak's government has engaged in a shameless campaign of misinformation, outright lies and breathtaking dishonesty. As for this,
we have an independent process on pay.
The government handpicks the members and sets the remit, and then it's delighted when they come back with an offer of a crappy real terms pay cut. The government's own health minister has admitted,
we could have ignored the pay review body's recommendation. So the pay review body, you're right, we don't have to stick to the recommendation.
Why wasn't that pointed out to the Prime Minister?
Right, they wanted nurses' bursaries reintroduced. We delivered that too. It's £5,000 a year for a nurse that's in training.
Well, again, imagine the Prime Minister's shock when he finds out the Conservative government scrapped the nurses' bursary, which previously reimbursed their tuition fees. A £5,000 grant goes nowhere near to compensating them for that huge loss. Thanks to the Conservative government scrapping the nurses' bursary, nurses now qualify tens of thousands of pounds in debt.
The biggest problem we have is that there are, at the moment, around 13,000 people in hospital beds who ideally should be back in their communities or in social care.
Well, on that, you're probably old enough to remember this.
I am announcing now on the steps of Downing Street that we will fix the crisis in social care once and for all with a clear plan we have prepared.
I guess it will come as no surprise to anyone that there actually wasn't one.
I celebrate and value the work of unions in our society. They play an important role and people should have the right to strike. That has to be balanced with the right of the British public to be able to go about their lives without suffering completely undue disruption in the way that we've seen recently. And that's why I said we will introduce new legislation that restores that balance.
Well, how about reminding the Prime Minister that the right to strike is fundamental to any democracy? That fundamental right is now under threat from Sunak's government. New proposed legislation intends to override a worker's basic right to withdraw their labour, forcing them to work against their will. Just think about that. It's the fundamental democratic right to strike which underpins our ability to win dignity in the workplace and earn a decent standard of living. It's no accident this right is under attack at the very moment workers across the country are standing together and fighting back against the biggest drop in living standards since records began.